Today I'm cooking Liberian food. I'm starting off with Dumboy and a hot pepper soup. So I'm starting off by creating the pepper soup. So I am using lamb shoulder for this. Traditionally it would be goat used, but goat is really quite hard to get a hold of here. I have yet to find anywhere that does it. But lamb is a reasonably good substitute, and it's quite easy to get in the UK since we have a heck of a lot of sheep here. So I'm just cutting up my shoulder into chunks. I'm using a shoulder just because it's like a reasonably cheap meat, and then I'll be cooking it off for a good few hours. So I'm browning it here, and then I'll just be boiling it down for, I think, 3 hours probably. That's usually a good amount of time. Traditionally, I guess you probably wouldn't cook it for too long, but this way it's just a lot more tender. Recipes seem to vary. At this point, I'm also going to be adding in a bunch of onion and some chilies. I think, well, again, it was difficult to figure out exactly which chilies are traditional, but basically the basis of this pepper soup is peppers, chili peppers. So in they will go. So I'm just throwing in the onions and the chilies now. And also some bay leaves. So as I say, the base of my soup will include lamb, and then I'll also be adding in some shrimp later. Since Liberia is a coastal country, they have access to a reasonable range of different ingredients, which is cool. And this pepper soup is seasoned with a bunch of different things. So pepper soup seasoning, it seems to vary a lot, but anise, cloves, coriander, allspice, fennel seeds, those seem to be pretty traditionally used. There's also cumin and ginger and tamarind. I'll be adding those in later because I have those as kind of fresh ingredients, and the cumin is ground, whereas these are whole spices, so I'm just adding them in a little like tea strainer-majig. So it'll be seasoning for a while. But this will be interesting. I am not great with fennel, and I added in a reasonable amount of fennel. And there goes in the ginger. I can tell you this smelled quite a lot like fennel, and fennel is scary. But we will see. But just throwing the cumin and also the tamarind paste. So just tamarind that's already been like squished up, really. I did make one critical error here. The tamarind I bought, I didn't realise it still had the seeds in. I didn't read the packaging, which did say it actually. I just didn't read it. So later I was eating. I was like, what are these weird chunks in here? And then I realised it was all the damn seeds. That was my bad. I will not be buying it with seeds in the future because they were really annoying. And now I'm preparing the Dumboy while the soup is simmering. So I'm taking my cassava root, cut it up, and I'm going to be boiling these cassava chunks. So Dumboy, apparently, the word itself comes from Bassa, door meaning mortar, and buoy meaning cassava. So it's basically cassava that's been put in a mortar. So pounded cassava. It's actually very similar to a typical African side dish called fufu. Except fufu is typically made of fermented cassava. So you take the cassava, you ferment the chunks in water for a few days, and then you make it into a pulp. This is done with fresh cassava, so it's a bit more like of a neutral flavour. I tried grinding it up with my pestle. I didn't put it in my mortar because my mortar's, well, it's reasonably big, but it was really difficult. It didn't work. I ended up using a stick blender, which worked. And then I just got my hands wet and formed it into big old balls. Traditionally, I think they need to be quite big, like grapefruit sized. It took a while to kind of figure out what size I needed. I went back and changed a few times. But essentially, I just formed this boiled pounded cassava into big old balls. Just using water to stop it sticking to me. It was quite a fun process. It was reasonably straightforward, but I ended up forming it. And after the 3 hours, my soup is nicely tender. The lamb is tender. And I'm going to be adding the okra in. Okra is quite slimy. My personal trick for it is, rather than just throwing it straight into the soup, I always fry it off on a reasonably high heat first. You might be able to see here all this gooey like strands between them. It's like glue, and it does persist if you don't. It's quite an acquired texture. But I find if you fry it off to this point, you see that all the kind of goo is gone. They've kind of like dried out a bit, which makes them so much nicer. Don't know how many other people do that, but I'm going to do it because it's better. And then I just throw it in the soup, basically. Which, as I say, the soup is tender, so I'm just finishing off at this point. It's got all the seasoning in there, the lamb is nice and tender, and the only thing really left to add is the prawns. I'm also just pulling out that those whole seasonings that I put in there, the anise and stuff, and also pulling out the lamb shoulder bone that I had in there, because why not get some extra nice bony flavour in there. And also the like shoulder cartilage thingamablob. But awesome. And then throwing in the prawns, and that's pretty much it for the soup. So it's a traditional accompaniment to the Dumboy or fufu, or whatever this pepper soup is. Apparently reasonably common across West Africa. So it should be fun. It should be reasonably spicy too. It's probably not as spicy as it should be, just because the peppers I used aren't the spiciest, just because it was kind of hard to find good peppers in the supermarket. But it gets through the stuff, and all the like different flavourings they add. They traditionally use Maggi cubes, which are kind of like a stock cube, so I did throw one in there, I forgot to mention. But anyway, here it is. There is the fufu in the middle. I just threw that in so it could warm up a bit. Traditionally you eat this by scooping the Dumboy with your hand and dipping in the soup, and also then just you swallow the Dumboy whole. That was a really interesting experience. I switched back quite quickly to chewing it, just because this tastes quite nice. But no, it was really good soup, really spicy, and really nice seasoning. For the dessert, I am making Liberian banana rice bread. For the bananas, I'm actually using ripe plantains. I'm just chopping them, and you see they peel quite easily compared to unripe plantains, if you've ever used them or seen a video of them being used. But just peeling them, and so this traditional rice bread is mainly based on the fact that one of the main foods in Liberia is actually rice, the second being cassava, hence the Dumboy. But rice is one of the traditionally eaten foods there, and so rice bread is essentially, think traditional banana bread, but made with rice flour and plantains instead. I whizzed my plantains up in a blender because it is a heck of a lot easier, and they were not like, because they weren't super ripe, they didn't mash. But the blender took care of that problem for me, and they came out really nice. Then I am just seasoning it with a little bit of salt, adding in nutmeg, and then also throwing in the bicarb of soda. That will just help it rise a little bit, adding in about a teaspoon of that, I think it was. And now I'm adding in the rice flour. So I'm just doing the dry ingredients first, including the sugar, and I'm just using some golden caster sugar just to give it a nice bit of colour. Mixing that all in, and like I say, I will do the wet ingredients in a second. I haven't actually ever made like normal rice bread, like banana bread, like Western banana bread. I don't really do much baking, so it's quite novel. Vanilla extract, added in a bunch of ginger paste, and then the eggs, good old eggs, I do like eggs, and also some milk. There's also, I melted a bit of butter in a cup, and I'll add them in a second so that I don't accidentally cook my eggs. But there we go, just blending that all up, and it's definitely an interesting texture, but it is quite a lot of plantain in there. And then I'm just throwing it into my dish. The recipe I was following said to cook it for something insane, like an hour and a half or 2 hours. It was interesting. I don't know how legit that is. I ended up throwing it in the oven for, I think it was cooked around 40 minutes, maybe. Not any longer than that, but I just, shoved a stick in the middle and it came out clean, so it was fine. And now I've just decorated it because it looks really cute. Put some flowering currant and primula on just to make it look nice. But the cake is the real star here. Anyway, sliced it up and served it. Anyway, it's a really interesting dessert, the plantain is slightly more grassy tasting. It's more like starchy. It's a bit more of a neutral banana flavour, so it's really nice. It's very like dense rice bready cake thing, but it was really good. I ended up having like some cream with it, and it was very nice. I definitely recommend trying it as an alternative.